Well, time to bust out the tickles. Beck lunged forward and began to tickle under Tish's arms. Tears began to form in Tish's eyes as she gasped for breath between gales of laughter. Beck redoubled her efforts until Tish finally had had enough. Iggy's eyes darted around, a realization dawning on his face that he was now outnumbered. Iggy kicked at the puddle before making his escape. Beck shook the ooze out of her hair as best as she could. Chapter 4. The Best Policy. Luca paused for a moment, catching his breath. He'd only just met Beck, and somehow he already managed to drag her into this mess. Hopefully he could make it up to her. But finding Rollo was his primary concern. Roxy and Fitz looked drained. It was clear they'd spent all day searching. Roxy's temper could often be dismissed as the impatience of an older sibling, but this was the most intense Luca had ever seen her. Her eyes were wild and unfocused, looking straight through Luca. In a torrent of rambled words and tears, Luca broke down. Roxy, still exhausted and angry, softened briefly as her eyes hunted the ground in thought. With a determined sigh, she looked up at Luca. Roxy drew herself up. Roxy tried to think of the safest place to send Luca. Luca wiped his cheeks and gave a quick nod. Looking into the puddle, Roxy rubbed her arms to warm up. Mr. Nuncree jumped with a start. Luca motioned to the phone booth. Mr. Nuncreed gently placed one of his substantial hands on Luca's shoulder. Luca peered up at Mr. Nuncreed. Kind eyes warmed a stern face. There was a deeper emotion hiding beneath it all. It was subtle, but Luca could sense something eating away at him. There was a shame lurking behind those eyes. A deep sadness. If Mr. Nuncreed was that worried about Rollo, maybe he could help. Mr. Nuncreed raised an eyebrow. Mr. Nuncreed's shoulders slumped. A deep sigh bellowed from his chest. Luca attempted to take a step back, but Nuncreed's hand clamped down on his shoulder. With a firm shove, Nuncreed manhandled Luca into the phone booth. The door latched shut with a mechanical hiss. As Luca pounded the glass, the floor dropped from under his feet. The inside of the phone booth was now a loose capsule plummeting at gravity's whim. Luca winced and pressed his hands to the walls. As he braced for impact, the capsule hurried to a surprisingly smooth stop. He felt a cold rush of air and opened his eyes with hesitance. Two large figures in hazmat suits occluded his view. Luca heard the deep, resigned voice of Mr. Nuncreed over an intercom. He knows too much. The end. Wait. No. This isn't the end. I know there's still much more. Somehow this went wrong. Okay, let's try something else. Well, time to bust out the strange. Beck stared in silence, the only sign of life being the twitch of an eye. At the sight of Iggy taunting Beck, something in Luca snapped. Iggy's smirk shifted to a look of shock as Luca launched himself into his stomach. Iggy's clothes were drenched in the glowing... Iggy's voice began to slur as he struggled to get up. The person at the warehouse, this strange ooze, and what it did to Iggy. Was Rollo caught up in all of this? glanced toward Luca. Rollo was safe. A wave of relief washed over Luca, which was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. Gran is going to kill me. If he hurried, he might just make it home before sundown. Chapter 4. Our harvest awaits. Luca took a deep breath and gingerly opened the door, steeling himself for Gran's wrath. Luca was alone. The house was empty. Luca was sitting by the pond, listening to small waves lap against a rock. His father sat in a folding chair in front of him. Without turning, he spoke. "Why don't you grab me some nice bait?" "Sure thing, Dad." Luca hopped over to the tackle box and popped open the lid. Inside was a rolling, buzzing mass. "We're fishing with bees?" Luca's father gave a warm chuckle. "Well, you catch more fish with bees than honey. Pick us out a good one." Luca closed his eyes and plucked out a bee. He could feel its wings struggle between his finger and thumb. Holding it at arm's length, he hurried over. His father deftly baited the hook and examined his work. "Interesting choice." With a practiced flick of the wrist, the line buzzed. The water accepted it without a splash or ripple. "The wrong choice, but I respect it." The pond began to freeze over. "Sometimes we gotta make the wrong choice before we can make it right." Pallid ice propagated across the still surface with an alarming speed. Luca scrambled back as the ground beneath him turned cold. "Dad, I don't understand." "Sorry, kiddo. Understanding isn't always part of the deal." The relentless ice shot through the fishing line toward his father. "Dad, look out!" His father casually wound the reel. "None of it's your fault, you know. Never was." "Dad, we have to go!" Luca grabbed his father's shoulders, trying to pull him away. "Please, you have to run!" The ice crackled as it spread across his father's hands. "That's the thing about fishing, Luca." His chest began to crystallize. "You toss your hook in, and you never know what you're gonna pull out." A shock of searing cold ran up Luca's arms. He gave one last desperate tug. The chair tipped backwards in a single frozen mass. Luca tried to stop the momentum, but it was too late. He watched the icy form of his father slam into the hard ground, shattering into 1,000 pieces that crowded around his feet. "Dad, I don't understand. What does all this mean?" The gentle rustle of leaves was the only reply. Luca's eyes struggled to focus on the walkie-talkie. Faintly, he could hear Rollo amongst the noise. Lolo's voice was coming through more clearly now, but some words were still just static. The signal went silent. Luca held still, waiting for a response, his pounding heartbeat marking the passage of time. Lolo's voice began to fade. With that, the signal died for good. Luca grabbed the walkie-talkie and sprinted to the treehouse. Luca heard a group of footsteps. He dashed behind the bushes to avoid being spotted. Mr. Tolliver paused, shifting his eyes to one side. Mr. Tolliver took one long, quiet breath. The three shared a determined look. The two boys shared a mischievous grin. Whenever Luca saw his dad's chair by the pond, it reminded him of the days they'd pack up a couple of sandwiches and fish until sundown. Luca tied a small magnet to the line, fishing with the law of attraction. Luca stuck a toy stretchy hand onto the hook. Those things always get dirty anyway. Luca wrapped some tape around the hook. Hey, you never know. Luca placed a sinker on the line. Sometimes the best stuff is at the bottom of the pond. Luca wrapped a twig of thyme around the hook. Some fish have refined taste. Luca gently baited a feather, good for skimming the surface. The boys had a good thing going. As long as they kept old Jeff happy, they had an endless source of precious materials to add to the treehouse. Luca could only see a cloaked shape behind the rocket. He strained to hear as a muffled voice began. Fear gripped Luca's throat. Luca stared at the ground for a moment, trying to place the dampened voice. The figure shifted slowly from behind the rocket, revealing itself to Luca. Luca reached over empathetically. Iggy's tone jolted to dejected anger. Luca slumped to the ground, overwhelmed by guilt. Iggy slumped to his knees. Luca grabbed the walkie-talkie and headed for the window. Luca and Iggy climbed up the back of the treehouse to its roof, where Rollo had constructed his MCDC, the Mission Control Defense Cannon. From behind the crowd of clipboards, William Kerr strode forward, a warm smile on his face. brother's smile faltered. Luca's grip tightened on the MCDC. Luca's mind raced. He was caught in a trap. What do you do when there's no hope? He wiped his cheeks with a sleeve. What are you gonna do, Luca? Luca drew himself up and decided to take the only option they had left. Flight. He squinted down the barrel of the mission control defense cannon, aiming it through an opening in the dense tree branches. He looked up with surprise as it struck true and taut. Luca and Iggy winced as they sprinted through the thicket. The branches clawed at them, reluctant to give passage. After what felt like a marathon, Luca stopped in his tracks as they reached the clearing. What the? That was all he was able to say before Iggy slammed into his back. The boys tumbled down a steep decline and crashed with a wheezing thud on a surface as hard as ice. In fact, it was ice. Chapter 5.